Okay, right. Shall we get cracking? I think let's get going. Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name's Gareth Colwell. I'm a marketing and communications officer here at Portico and also at Portsmouth International Port. So this morning we are holding a seminar to find out if your business is making the most of modal shift. So obviously this is a combination of factors that has happened across the shipping industry and across the logistics industry in general in reaction to various issues, including driver shortages, supply chain issues, container congestion, and it's about how your business could potentially take advantage of that. So this morning we've got Justin Atkin from who is the UK and Ireland representative of the Port of Antwerp, industry expert and also Portico board member, who's going to talk about his experience specifically relating to the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. And then we'll hear from Matt Green, who's the key account manager here at Portico, about the services available here and how smaller ports can help you take advantage of modal shift in the shipping industry. So without further ado, and just before we carry on any further, this session is being recorded as well, so we can share it out later on. So if you don't want to be seen, you can keep your camera off. And by all means, put questions in the chat or put your hands up at the end as well. And we'll put your questions to Matt and Justin. So yes, I will hand over to Justin now, who's got a presentation to share. On our trial run, it did take a couple of seconds to load up, so I'll leave it to you, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Gareth. Good morning, Matt, down in Portsmouth, and to everyone that has joined so far. So without further ado, I'll start to load up my presentation. If you could just bear with me. As Gareth said, it did take a couple of seconds just to upload in the dry run. So whilst that's taking place, actually today we've just for the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, we've actually just announced our half-yearly figures for the for half one 2022, and I think despite the challenging ongoing geopolitical and macroeconomic situation, we have still seen, I'm pleased to report, a slight growth. So in the first 6 months of the year, we've been able to achieve 1.4% growth. So that was 147 million tons of cargo in the first 6 months. I think probably our biggest challenge at the moment is on the container sector. Throughput of containers, and we've seen sort of 7 or 8 years of consecutive growth in containers, and we forecast, and you'll see this in my presentation, we forecast growth in the future, but at the moment we've seen a 6.2% decline in our container throughput. A significant amount of that has been about the global disruption in container liner shipping, but also added to that, we've seen quite a significant amount of our volume which would go to Russia impacted. So that's actually declined more than 39%, and that's had an impact upon those numbers as well. The presentation is loaded, but I'll just very quickly finish off on our 6 monthly overview. On a more positive side, we've seen really strong growth in our conventional breakbulk traffic of 22%. Ro-ro has grown at 9%, dry bulk at 17.6%, and liquid bulk, including gas, at 16.5%. So other than containers, we've actually seen growth, and actually quite significant growth in all of those sectors. But as I say, the only negative there is on containers. So moving forward, hopefully you can see my presentation on the screen. So Port of Antwerp-Bruges, actually 1 port, 2 sites. We have had a long courtship, but actually only recently married. So the Ports of Antwerp and Zeebrugge formally merged just around a month ago, and we sit at the heart of Europe. We have a really simple business plan, and that's all about the future. And our business plan is focused on becoming a global port that reconciles people, climate, and economy. Some headline numbers across the two platforms, the two sites. The port estate is over 14,000 hectares. We are a landlord port, so we own the port, but we don't operate it. That's undertaken by our concessions, and there are around 1,400 companies across the port estate. Between them, they employ more than 160,000 people directly and indirectly. And the Port of Antwerp-Bruges itself as a company generates almost 5% of entire Belgian GDP, which is somewhere in the region of 21 billion euros of added value. And we place a lot of significance as being a front runner in energy transition. Not something I'm going to talk about a lot today, but yeah, that's something we place a lot of emphasis on. These are our 2021 numbers, so just short of 290 million tonnes, and you know, I made great emphasis there in the introduction on the impact on our core business, containers. You can see containers plays a significant part in throughput, particularly in Antwerp, but also in Zeebrugge. And then the rest of our volumes, really, it's liquid bulks. It's containers, containers, it's ro-ro, it's breakbulk and conventional cargoes. Some headline numbers from our cargoes. So we're not the largest port in Europe, but we actually are the largest player in a number of areas. So we're the largest car handling port in Europe with more than 3 million finished units a year. The vast majority of those through our Zeebrugge site. We're also the largest chemical hub in Europe, actually the second largest in the world. So we're home to you know, a significant hub of chemical companies. We're actually the largest export port in Europe. So actually we have a healthy balance of exports, and not a lot of people know this, but we're also quite an important cruise port, and that's actually has some synergies here with Portsmouth as well. So this is all about our Zeebrugge platform. So the most important cruise port in the Benelux, with more than 300,000 passengers ordinarily. Numbers were down previously due to COVID. And we also import 15% of the EU's gas. Again, that is predominantly through Zeebrugge, through our LNG terminals there. So this presentation is about connectivity. So I wanted to move on to that. So we actually are a global port, and we've got connections from Antwerp and Zeebrugge to more than 1,200 destinations globally, in all of the major continents. We're very strong in North and Central America, Latin America, very strong in Africa, and also in the Far East. But we've also got you know, quite good services into the Middle East, the Near East, and into the Pacific as well. So very much a globally connected port, but also on a more local basis, where we have sort of 60% of the European consumer market within 500 kilometres, and that includes, you can see from the circle there, the south of England falls into that area. This overview sort of shows the two port platforms. So Antwerp is very much an inland port, 80 kilometres inland, and Zeebrugge gives us that coastal optionality. Since we merged, one of our priorities is how we can better improve connectivity between the two ports sites, between Zeebrugge and Antwerp. But already we have options of double deep sea calls, so discharge Antwerp, discharge Zeebrugge. That's an option, of course. We actually operate a small sister company offering estuary shipping connectivity between Bruges and Antwerp, and that's certainly something that we are keen to explore and expand. Similarly with rail, there is an existing rail connection, but more can be done there to connect the two sites. We have pipeline connectivity and, of course, strong road connectivity as well. Yeah, just a little bit about our barge connectivity. So these are using reinforced barges or coastal barges, and they're particularly suited to bulk and high and heavy cargoes. But I'd say that's something that we really see an opportunity to expand. Barge, we offer extensive barge connectivity across Europe. You can see from the graphic that our connectivity reaches well into Germany, well into France. And this is something we have an action plan to build this connectivity and increase the amount of volume. So whether that's looking at bundling cargoes and minimum call sizes, improved planning and collaboration, but there's lots of opportunity for moving cargo by barge. And a lot busier slide here. We're doing an awful lot of work on improving our rail connectivity. Every single quay side in the Port of Antwerp has rail connectivity. We actually have over 1,000 kilometers of rail on the port itself, and yet in 2021 only around 8 or 9% of our volume moved between the from the port by rail. So we've got a really ambitious target by 2030 to increase that to more than 15% and really optimize that infrastructure and also extend our reach. But you can see we already have rail connections well into Eastern Europe, into Poland, into Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and close to Turkey as well. And there's a lot of volume moving from Turkey. So that's something that we're really focusing on. So rail, really important. This graphic shows our pipeline connectivity. So, you know, a significant amount of our volume is gas and oil, and it's important that we're able to move that both by road, rail, barge, but most efficiently by pipeline. And of course, and very relevant to this presentation is short sea as part of that connectivity, that multimodal offering. So again, this graphic shows our extensive short sea connections down into North Africa, Iberia, up into Scandinavia, and of course, very relevant into the UK and Ireland. And despite the decline in trade post-Brexit between the UK and the EU, actually we saw our short sea connections with the UK and particularly with Ireland actually increase in the year following Brexit. So again, something that we're really keen to build upon. Enough about connectivity, but I think something that's also important, and this will no doubt come out in Matt's presentation as well, is also the importance of added value handling and logistics. A port has to be more than just an importer and exporter of cargo, and certainly in Antwerp and in Zeebrugge, this is something that we or our concessions really try and maximise out on. So, you know, we have steel service centres, we have vehicle service centres, warehouse activities where we undertake sampling, packing, ripening, stuffing and stripping, even e-commerce order picking. So all of these added value services are offered by concessions that are actually operating within the port. So yeah, I mean, you know, as I say, we're one of the largest, or we are the largest exporter of automotive units, but it's important to those automotive customers that they can actually undertake a lot of the preparation and PDI works very close to the point of export. And so, you know, as I say, as part of these added value logistics services, that's something that our concessions are offering to that sector. Similarly, in Breakbulk, as well as the warehousing, you know, we're offering additional added value services, labelling as an example, bagging, packing, grading, all of these services are available. Steel, we have a soft spot for steel, as the slide says, and again, our steel service centres on the port are offering semi-industrial activities such as decoiling and cutting, labelling, stock control, and the such. And for cold chain, which is an important sector to us, and again, I'm sure Matt will touch upon that and its importance in Portsmouth. You know, we're handling more than 2 million, oh sorry, we have more than 2 million square meters of specialist cold storage on the port, and our specialized service providers are offering the added value services that the cold chain shippers require. And then just finishing off on containers, this has been and will continue to be a strong sector for the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. We're expecting over the coming years to see an annual growth. It's not been the case, as I say, in the first 6 months of this year for the reasons explained in the introduction, but we're seeing, you know, an annual growth we expect of certainly up to about 3.1%, and therefore that will lead to an increased demand in container handling, container storage, container services. We're pretty strong in containers in Antwerp-Bruges because we have a very strong split, almost a 50-50 split for imports, exports, which anyone working in the supply chain will know. If you can refill a container, it makes that service so much more cost effective. Our major markets are listed there on the right of the slide, and you know, the UK is and continues to be one of those major markets. But containers continues to be a challenge. It is about capacity. Global demand, taking the first 6 months of this year aside, global demand for containers continues to grow, and that slide there shows our main competitors in the sort of the Hamburg, Le Havre range, all seeing sort of reasonably steady growth over the last sort of 20 years, but starting to taper off due to capacity issues. And how are we going to tackle that? Well, of course, we plan for it. So we've already started and actually been through the consultation process of adding another deep sea container terminal. So we already have 5 in Antwerp and 1 in Zeebrugge. And in 2023, we'll start to build a brand new dock for containers in Antwerp. Also examine possibilities to expand the terminal in Zeebrugge. So that's taken about 10 minutes. It was a quick canter through. I'm going to hopefully stop sharing this presentation and hand over to Matt. But I may need Gareth to take control and to get rid of this off the screen. There we go.
Lovely. Thanks, Justin. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Matt Green from the Port of Portsmouth, the Portico terminal. I am the key account manager, part of the commercial team. Brief introduction into what we do here at Portico. We are one of the biggest importers of fresh produce, with 2 deep sea liner services weekly, and we also do a 3 times a week lifeline service to the Channel Islands. So we're well versed in handling containers here. Much like the Port of Antwerp, we are a municipal port owned by the local government. But in contrast to Antwerp, we are much, much smaller. We are a 20-acre site, and we need to look at what we can offer to people and their supply chains. To this point, I'm just going to touch on what we've done up to this point. And as Justin was mentioning there, with the congestion in the large container ports, which was well documented 18 months or so ago, we actually did a lot of work with several of the big container lines to ease some of the congestion in repositioning empties from the over-congested UK container terminals and get them to where they needed to be and where they could be shipped back to the Far East. We can accept sub-Panamax sized vessels, so we can turn vessels around quickly and get containers back to where they need to be, or also cargo closer to where it needs to be. We've got motorway connectivity within minutes. We can have containers off their vessel and on the road within minutes. Off the back of that work that we've done with some of the container lines, we've actually been working now with CMA-CGM off the back of their investment with Brittany Ferries, and they've now started what they call the fast lane service, which is essentially Far East and transatlantic services into Le Havre. The containers are then transshipped onto the Brittany Ferries Ro-Ro vessels in Le Havre and brought over on Skelly trailers on board Brittany Ferries service, which is daily, and that then cuts out about a week of transit time and a week of unnecessarily travelling around Europe from port to port before it gets to the port of discharge where it needs to be. With that, there's also been a large increase in unaccompanied freight on the other side of the port here in Portsmouth, on the Portsmouth International Port. Post Brexit, driver shortages and various other factors have meant that there just isn't the driver availability for the drivers to cross over with their cargo. So there's been a large increase in that, and off the back of that, Portico has now started its own haulage. We've just taken delivery of 8 brand new trucks, with potentially more on the way to try and support that, which is another one of those value added services that Justin was talking about, whereby we try to support the supply chains. On top of that, we've also got warehousing. We can offer cross docking. We've got cold storage, and we can also offer ambient storage. We also have a customs clearance and freight forwarding team. We want to be able to assist people in getting their cargo to where it needs to be as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And as a regional port, we see that as our biggest opportunity, working with really well connected ports like the Port of Antwerp as a hub port, and we see the opportunity to use smaller vessels which are less susceptible, less sensitive to outside impacts and disruption, to get their cargo where it needs to be and reduce the road miles associated with just shipping to the large container terminals. So that's about it from me. I'll stop waffling on, but if anybody's got some questions, then please feel free to fire them at either Justin or myself.
I've got a few pre-prepared, pre-submitted questions actually. So let me just kick it off. So one for both of you actually. I'll just stop spotlighting you, Matt. How have priorities for supply chain managers changed in light of several years of turbulence following events including Brexit, the pandemic, the Evergreen incident, most likely the situation in Ukraine? I don't know, Justin, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I would say that I've worked in the industry for many years, and the key driver for the most part of that time was cost. I would say over the last couple of years, whilst cost is important and shouldn't be forgotten, I actually think security of supply chain is actually one of the key drivers. If you don't have goods in your warehouse, in your manufacturing facility, on your supermarket shelf, then irrespective of what it's cost you, you can't sell them, you can't build the car, you can't make the whatever it is that you're going to make. So actually, we saw examples here in the UK of the classic toilet roll shortage and bags of flour, but we've also seen petrol shortages and actually beyond that, actually lots of commodities from the supermarket shelves, whilst they weren't missing, were very much thinner. I think the lead time in, for example, for buying a new car, for construction materials, everything seems to be more difficult to get hold of, either as a retail consumer or if you're part of needing raw materials as part of your manufacturing process. So security, I would say, is one of the main key drivers. Reliability, frequency, and ultimately sustainability. But I think sustainability is important now. I think it will be increasingly important in the future, and then obviously add cost into that mix as well.
Thanks, Justin. So I've got another one here. So what elements are required to establish a successful short sea connection between the UK and Europe? For example, between Portsmouth and Antwerp-Bruges, for example. Matt, did you want to have a go? Take that one.
Yeah. So it's about firstly establishing the cargo flows. The service isn't going to start without cargo, but it's also about how you can connect, your hinterland connectivity. For example, Justin touched on in his presentation that that they've got rail connections as far as Turkey and into Eastern Europe. So it's about not only connecting the ports, but how you then move inland and you join those dots end to end.
Yeah, and I think I fully agree with that. And actually, probably we should mention at this point, there actually is a service between Portsmouth and actually Antwerp. It's once a week and it's one way, but it is a service. But yeah, in the future, who's to say that couldn't become something more frequent? I mean, for me, I think everything that Matt's just mentioned there, it's about getting the goods from point of origin to ultimate point of destination in the most efficient and sustainable and reliable and secure and cost efficient way. That is the ideal for any supply chain manager. I think frequency is really important, and certainly something, and Port of Antwerp is our Antwerp platform we're 80 kilometers inland, so whilst that gives us excellent hinterland connectivity, it makes it very difficult to offer a very frequent short sea service because we're already 80 kilometers inland. But since the merger of the two ports at Zeebrugge, we have a coastal port platform, and Zeebrugge certainly does offer that frequency. We have daily services at present into UK ports such as Purfleet on the Thames and into Killingholme on the Humber. And who's to say in the future, because I know down in Portsmouth you also have a very active ferry terminal, who's to say that in the future that couldn't be a future route as well. So I think frequency of service added to what Matt has already said is a really important element.
Yeah, which is fed off, which is why the CMA and Brittany Ferries fast lane service has been so successful, because whilst shaving off 7 or 8 days from their transit time on the deep sea vessel, there is then that daily service continually feeding into the UK on a regular basis.
Yeah, and I think given the size of the UK, I mean, whilst railways and canals go back to the Industrial Revolution, were two of the elements that made this country great. Unfortunately, nowadays, and particularly canals, but also rail, they don't play as active a part in our freight supply chain as perhaps we would like them to be, and therefore the UK, whilst rail, there is an opportunity still there for rail and also for water, inland water. Road, rightly or wrongly, still plays a really important part in our first and last mile delivery. And I think Matt touched upon the fact that Portico have recognised that. They've recognised the challenges that are prevalent in the UK haulage sector, and incidentally, those same challenges are also occurring in mainland Europe as well. And Portico have made that investment in those 8 vehicles, or initial 8 vehicles, to help with their first and last mile delivery, because you don't necessarily have the rail and inland waterway connection. Obviously, across the water we do have that superior connectivity, which makes the port so much more accessible to a much wider European market.
Thanks, Justin. So actually, sort of leading on from that, another question we had was about how smaller and larger UK ports in the UK can work in tandem to boost UK trade. So that's interesting, looking at more cooperation as opposed to competition. I don't know if anyone wants to grab that one, Matt.
Well, I think Justin's demonstrated how 2 ports can work together. I think as Justin was mentioning about the barge service between Zeebrugge and the Port of Antwerp, that demonstrates how you can work together as a for example, a large container terminal, hub terminal for large volumes, the large vessels, and then rather than sending trucks onto the road, you can ship coastally. And again, like the work we did with empty container restitution and repositioning, we worked with the container lines to take the pressure off the large container terminal, Southampton, for example, just up the road, to allow them to continually, keep their import operation going and taking the pressure off the repositioning of empty containers.
Yeah, and I think absolutely agree that collaboration is a word that we use a lot in Antwerp-Bruges on lots of different fronts, particularly around energy and decarbonisation. But I say for many years, Antwerp and Zeebrugge were competitors, and actually now we're working together, realising the advantages and the benefits of each separate port location, and actually making sure that we maximise those advantages ultimately for the benefit of our customers. But we're probably the latest example. You could look at other collaborations, for example, North Sea ports, which has seen ports, smaller ports like Ghent in Belgium and some of the Dutch ports actually working together as a single company, pooling their assets and working together. It's not something in the UK that UK ports have been very good at collaborating, and that's perhaps something to do with the ownership model of UK ports generally, and accepting that Portsmouth is the exception rather than the rule, but the vast majority of the UK port sector is privately owned by a handful of large port companies, and therefore there's a lot of competition there between the ports. And actually, as Matt has demonstrated there with the restitution of containers in Portsmouth aren't there to take Southampton on, for example. They actually see themselves, I think I'm right, Matt, as very much complementary to the services that Southampton can attract, even though they're two separate companies.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully with the start of the Solent Freeport initiative, with all the ports within the Solent, us, DP World, Solent Gateway at Marchwood, we've all engaged together as part of this Freeport bid, and hopefully that can then be a stepping stone to show really what the Solent can offer as a whole and how we can each complement each other.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. I made the remark that cooperation and collaboration is not a strong point for UK ports, but actually the free ports are a really good example of collaboration, where regions have pulled together ports from opposing companies and actually working together as one, as opposed to as disparate organisations.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and also Matt as well about the Solent Freeport, and I think about how the two, us and Southampton can complement each other, and I think it's across the port as well, really, as well when it comes to cruise as well. I mean, we're both looking at different markets and those sort of things. So I think, if we can extend that across the board, that's a great thing. I think you touched upon this in your presentation, Justin. But what added value services can ports provide that make them increasingly attractive to supply chain managers? Matt, did you want to kick off with what's available at Portico, and then maybe hand over to Justin?
So for us as Portico, we try and offer a full sort of end-to-end service. We offer freight forwarding services, so we can organise the whole supply chain, but we also offer just customs formalities. We've got warehousing, both cold storage, we've got ambient storage, outside storage, and also this investment in transport, which has been a big pain in the industry over the last year to 18 months, sort of post Brexit, post pandemic. So it's that trying to offer the full package to sort of make life as easy as possible for a supply chain manager, and give them confidence that you're a one-stop shop and can really meet their needs.
Yeah, and I suppose slight difference in Antwerp-Bruges. We are the port owner, but we don't operate the port, unlike Portico. So these added value services, whilst they're available, are provided by our customers, who are our concessions. So we lease our facilities to terminal operators, who then offer these services. But as you saw from the presentation, you look at our major commodity sectors, every one of those requires added value services, and whether that is car preparation, whether it is taking raw industrial steel and providing it in the suitable format for car manufacturing, the next stage of the car manufacturing process, whether it's I know that Portico handle a lot of bananas. Zeebrugge, we're actually the largest importer of Europe of kiwi fruit. I think that was on one of the slides. So again, that particular shipper or importer of kiwi fruits needs a grading service, and a boxing and a packing service and a labelling service, and all of these added value services are available to shippers on the port. In Antwerp, Decathlon, who are one of the major sportswear and sports equipment retailers, have extensive, and they have stores in the UK, but an extensive footprint of store estate in Europe, and they use Antwerp as their distribution hub for the European presence. So the service provider there is unstuffing containers and even providing e-commerce solutions at the side of the port for that particular customer.
Thanks, Justin. I think so. One more question, probably. So, looking sort of into the future, sort of, do you see a growth in more short sea container services in the short to medium term? And generally, how do you see the industry developing sort of over the longer term as well? What if you had a crystal ball to look into the future? What would your predictions be, Justin?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one because I think I mean this is a personal opinion, but I think it's supported by people that know more than I do out there. But one of the other things that we've seen as a result of the last 2 or 3 years of supply chain disruption, for all the different reasons that it's occurred, is perhaps manufacturers, supply chain managers, producers will start to look at shortening their supply chains. So I'm not necessarily saying that will mean that all manufacturing will come back to the UK, but I think rather than relying upon shipments out of China for a significant amount of a consumer's or manufacturer's goods, I think we will see manufacturing brought back into Europe. And so, yes, the supply chain is still required, but it will be a shorter supply chain. And I still think, and I think that will drive an increase in the demand for better connectivity between the wider European hinterland and European ports. So hence the work that we're doing on rail and on barges, and also extending our pipeline network. But I think it will also be, I think we'll see the opportunity for more connections between mainland Europe, the UK, or mainland Europe and Ireland as well. And who's to say that actually you couldn't have a service calling UK and Ireland? That's my opinion. I think we'll see supply chains shorten.
Thanks, Justin. I've got a question coming from Alex Pepper. What are the barriers to modal shift in the UK? Justin mentioned the limits of inland waterways and rail in the UK compared with Europe, but what are the barriers to coastal shipping?
Do you want to take that, Matt?
I think up to this point it goes as Justin was saying earlier, in that the UK ports very much see each other as competitors rather than collaborating. But I don't think there's anything necessarily physically to stop that happening. But also the sort of the geography of the UK. You're never a huge distance away from another port by road. So I think up to this point, when road haulage has been easier, and it is getting more difficult and more expensive, certainly, there's been a tendency just to take the easy option and to ship and to move it by road.
I think it's a great question from Alex, actually. I think exactly as Matt said there, the fact that the way that the UK the ports are structured in terms of their ownership. That said, some of the larger UK port operators do have a wide network of ports that could be utilised for coastal shipping, at least between their own ports, if not between a competitors. There were certain schemes available. The government offered at one point sort of a scheme where they were encouraging coastal shipping to take freight off the roads, and that you can call it whatever you want, it's a subsidy. But ultimately, if we've got challenges around the availability of road transport and the extent of the rail network is limited as well, then actually, maybe incentives to try and encourage some short sea services. There are actually some good examples already of short sea services where commodities, for example, are moving from perhaps Scotland, I'm thinking particularly around forest products, into the mainland UK. I'm aware of one service where wood pellets are being shipped out of sort of Enniskillen area into the Humber region. So that's a really good example of coastal shipping. But I think there's more that could be done. But I think that what that needs is it needs, again, we used the word, didn't we, earlier, collaboration. Perhaps it needs a couple of opposing port companies to actually identify a solution and work together so that they both benefit, both in terms of a loading and a discharge port. So I don't think there are any barriers other than increased collaboration and maybe some sort of some support there to kickstart some of these schemes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Justin. So I think that probably brings us to a close, unless anyone else has got anything to add. If you do, put your hand up very, very quickly. But yeah, so I think, is there any comments you'd like to add at the end, Justin and Matt? Maybe how people can get in touch with you if they want to find out any more?
Yeah, for me to close, I mean, obviously the title of the seminar was, are you taking advantage of the modal shift? I would like to think that in this sort of 50 minutes or so that we've had, that we've been able to give some examples of of the routes of the different supply chain options that are available, both in Antwerp-Bruges and in Portsmouth. I mean, we're just representing 2 ports here. Of course, other ports do exist, but I think for me the key messages are supply chain have changed, priorities in supply chains have changed, and I don't see them necessarily going back to how things were, where it was purely cost driven. Cost is important, but it's just one factor. And I think as the world continues to change and around security of supply chains will shorten, supply chains will become increasingly more sustainable, where carbon will have a cost to ultimately to the consumer, and therefore I think supply chain managers will continually look to improve and re-engineer their supply chains, and it's our role as ports to provide those solutions.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll just sort of echo what Justin has said there. It's it's about getting the message out there to supply chain managers that's they don't have to stick with the status quo. You can think outside the box and re-engineer supply chains to sort of increase resilience in that supply chain, increase sustainability, and hopefully decrease cost, both financial and as Justin was touching on, the carbon offset.
Yeah, great. Thank you both for your time this morning. We will be making this available online in due course. So yeah, we'll pop it on LinkedIn as well if you want to share it with any of your colleagues. Yeah, so thank you for coming, and yeah, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
everyone.
you, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.